Next on Unsolved Mysteries, a car crash becomes an elaborate cover-up for murder, and the victim's husband becomes a suspect in her death. A man has a close encounter with a UFO and is left with a bizarre pattern of burns that no one can explain. An out-of-control driver may also be responsible for the murder of a trucker. For over a century, prospectors have searched for gold worth millions in the legendary Lost Dutchman's mine. Finally, one may be about to find it.
In 3 days.
5 cases, some without endings. Our team is working on them, and perhaps you can help. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Vidor, Texas. It's early dawn. There's been a car crash. The woman behind the wheel is dead, her skin cool to the touch. At first glance, it appears to be a tragic accident, but within minutes, puzzling details begin to emerge. The dead woman has no obvious wounds, and the car is barely damaged. Soft drinks in the front seat haven't even spilled. The woman's feet are pushed back against the seat rather than stretched out towards the pedals. She isn't wearing a seatbelt, yet the crash had not thrown her forward.
Being no damage to the interior of the vehicle and very little, if not any, damage to the exterior of the vehicle and the deepness of the ditch, plain to see this was a staged incident instead of an accident. So at that point, they thought they had probably a questionable death.
The woman is Kathy Page, a wife and mother of 2. Her home was just 100 yards from the crash site. When police arrive, Kathy's husband, Steve, answers the door.
Who is it?
Vidor Police. I'm Sergeant Mosley of the Vidor Police Department. Are you Mr. Page?
Yes.
Mr. Page, you know where your wife's at?
My wife?
He said, well, his wife was not home and directly looked straight down the street towards where the car was.
It's about my wife?
Yes, it is, sir. Sorry to advise you, sir. We found her deceased in her vehicle this morning. Can we step inside the residence?
Steve seemed to be quite upset.
He began to cry at times, and at times threw himself on the couch crying, but yet he would jump right back up and we would talk, and there would be no signs of tears in his eyes. This seems strange to me.
Was she in a car accident?
Sir, we don't know all the details. We're still
Police immediately focused their investigation on Steve Page.
Of course, I did not kill my wife. The evidence clearly shows that the perpetrator was someone other than Steve Page.
However, many people in the small town of Vidor, Texas, are convinced that Steve Page did have a strong motive to kill his wife. Page insists he's innocent. See what you think. Kathy and Steve Page had 2 daughters, Erin and Monica. They seemed like the perfect family, but apparently the couple had drifted apart in their marriage.
Mainly, she was uncomfortable with who she was, or at least that was what she explained to me, that she didn't know who she was. She wanted to try to find out who Kathy was. Because of that, we talked about separating for a short period of time and allowing her to hopefully find herself.
Kathy's sister Sherry disagrees. She says the marriage was beyond repair.
Kathy was definitely moving on in her life at that point because the decision was made for the divorce. And that in itself, having a decision like that finally be resolved in itself was a real relief off her back. And she was making plans for that.
Steve moved out of the house, but says his relationship with Kathy remained friendly. One day, she asked him to babysit their daughters while she went out with a friend.
She said she was going to meet one of her girlfriends after work. So I went over there. She left at approximately 11:15 to 11:30 to head to Beaumont to meet her friend.
When Kathy's body was found, she wasn't wearing any makeup or jewelry. The autopsy showed she had been strangled and that her nose was broken. There were bloodstains on her underwear and skin, but strangely, there was no blood on her outer clothing.
Kathy Page was not killed in her vehicle. She was killed at another location, cleaned up, redressed, and placed back in her vehicle. And after the vehicle had been rolled into the ditch.
Police reconstructed Kathy's final hours. They learned that she'd had sex shortly before she died. Kathy did not meet her girlfriend, but instead spent the evening with a male lover. He freely admitted that on the night Kathy died, they had sex at a motel.
Goodbye. Thanks.
He came to the police station, he gave us a statement, and also voluntarily gave us a polygraph examination, which he passed with flying colors.
The autopsy confirmed that Kathy did have sex on the night she died. The results also revealed that whoever Kathy slept with had a vasectomy. However, that didn't match Kathy's secret lover, but it did match her estranged husband. He had had sex with Kathy the night she died and claimed it was before she went out.
Expecting me, Steve.
Come on. She was getting ready. She just got out of the shower. I approached her about sex, and we had sex before she left, before she got dressed even.
I personally don't believe that that happened. She wouldn't have been with Steve before being with another man. She hadn't been with Steve in a long time. He's already sleeping on the couch.
For Kathy's family, there is only one possible scenario. It all began with 2 phone calls.
I was talking to a sister-in-law of Steve's, and she said that she knew for a fact that Steve made 2 phone calls. Steve called this one number, and the girl answered, and he hung up, and then the second phone number was called, and they said the name of the hotel, and he hung up. And so he already knew where she might be or was.
I feel like she came in that night and come in the back door after she'd unparked the car, and he was asleep sitting in a chair in the front room. And when she went on in the bathroom and changed clothes, took her makeup off, took her jewelry and all off, and he heard her probably in the bathroom. And he got up and demanded sex with her or whatever, got in a fight.
Kathy's family believes the fight escalated. Steve raped Kathy, then strangled her.
Then Steve, realizing what had happened, he wants to redress her. If you look at the violent crime profile, it fits him to a T. You know, the remorse, you want to redress, you don't want them to be found naked or bloody. So there was an attempt to clean her up and redress her. But things were forgotten. For instance, her jewelry and her socks.
The reason it comes down on me is because I'm the husband. I'm the estranged husband, to make it even worse, and because of her actions. I am being blamed for her actions. She was out seeing another guy. So therefore, it could only have been me. I must have found out somehow, according to the police, and became enraged and committed murder.
Steve has his own theory about who killed his wife.
Okay, yeah.
I received threats on the phone that the same thing that happened to my wife could happen to me. There was a certain person here in Beaumont that was bandied about as a person who may have been involved. It's a very prominent family, an Italian family even, to let you know that they're considered part of the Beaumont Mafia.
The murder of Kathy Page has never been solved. However, Kathy's family won a wrongful death civil suit against Steve Page, and police still consider him a person of interest in this case. If you have any information, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, a man in Canada claims he had a frightening encounter with a UFO. People who claim to see UFOs typically don't have any evidence to verify their stories. But the eyewitness that you're about to meet came back with more than a tall tale. The evidence of his encounter was actually burned into his body. Steven Michalak and his wife came to Canada from Poland after World War II. Steven was an industrial mechanic in a local cement plant. He was also an avid rock collector.
I love nature, I love birds, animals. Every weekend I usually go out in the country and snooping in the rocks.
One weekend, he was prospecting in the hills east of Winnipeg when he was suddenly distracted by a noisy flock of geese.
I noticed two cigarette-like shape things with the hump in the middle. I said, what the hell is that? One stay in the air, and the other one is coming down. Down, down. I start looking for marks, NASA or something written on it. No, nothing, I didn't see anything on it. But still I was thinking that probably experimenting vehicle from United States.
Steven made this sketch of the strange craft just after it landed.
I do remember one description that he gave at the time. He said that the skin of the craft, the outside of the craft, was flawless.
Stan Michalak was only 10 years old at the time.
It was as though you had milled out of a solid block of steel this disc, this saucer with a dome on top.
Steven told his son that after a few minutes, the door of the craft slowly opened.
When the gate opened, there was a giri, 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 kind of shrieky talk like a kid's in problem or something.
As he drew closer to the door, the light was so bright that he had to snap down the visor on his safety goggles. Then, after a few moments, the door suddenly shut. Steven says the craft then rotated counterclockwise. It knocked him backwards, and his shirt caught on fire.
After igniting with the fire, the craft lifts up 30 to 40 feet and vanished. And then I decided, I said, now is the time for me to buzz off from here. So I started going.
In shock, Steven headed back towards his car. He was nauseous and vomited several times. Disoriented, he checked his compass, trying to find his way southeast to the road. The needle went haywire. Steven made his best guess at the right direction. 9 hours later, he finally arrived back home in Winnipeg. He was badly burned and still disoriented, which left doctors baffled.
At that point in time, the diagnosis, if you can call it that, was burns. And sure, they were burns, yes. Heat caused burns. What they couldn't diagnose and didn't have a clue about was what appeared below the chest, on the abdomen. The exact same pattern of holes that was on the grid on the side of the craft, in the same order, in the same rows, in the same number, appeared as red spots on his lower abdomen, red dots.
Steven was released from the hospital, but his nausea continued, and his body had a strange odor of burning sulfur.
There was this sulfur ozone electric burning motor stink about him. It's like he's carrying an aura of this smell. Wherever you walked and you got close to you, you could smell this. Not baths, showers wouldn't take it out. That lasted for weeks.
Steven was tested for radiation poisoning. The results were negative. No one could explain what caused the strange burns on his body, or the sulfur odor.
The physicians were actually unable to determine many of Michalak's ailments. They knew, for example, he was physically thermally burned. His chest was burned and singed. But the pattern lower down on his chest was very, very unusual. It was eventually determined that it was a chemical burn, not a radiation burn, although he did have some symptoms that might have suggested to some people that some sort of radiation effects might have been involved.
6 weeks after the encounter, Steven and a friend went looking for the site.
Bob, come, quick!
After several hours, they found a burnt-out circle, the same size as the craft Steven had seen. It was more than 30 feet wide.
This is it! I knew it! I told you!
On this barren patch of rock was a circular ring of vegetation, dead pine needles, dirt, leaves, that sort of thing. The rock had been swept clean except for this ring which was surrounding this area. They also noticed that a few of the trees appeared to have dead branches, as if something had either come in and touched them or brushed by them with an intense heat or some other effects.
Within days, a team of experts from the United States working with the Royal Canadian Air Force converged on the site. They took measurements, cataloged soil samples, and checked for radiation. The levels appeared quite high, and the health department considered quarantining the area. Later, however, they discovered that the high levels were caused by an unrelated vein of radium, which ran under the entire region.
Mr. Michalak, this is my colleague, Dr. Shaw. Doctor? He's a radiologist.
Meanwhile, Steven's burns suddenly flared up again. His doctors remained puzzled.
After every 3 months, my burns were coming back, showing up again, and burning and vomiting.
To this day, you can, if you let you, can press into his skin and feel subcutaneous scar tissue in the form of those burns on his chest, which he playfully calls his buttons. And it's there. You cannot deny this. This is there.
It's cracks.
1 year after Steven's close encounter, he and a friend returned to the site.
So where is it? Is it in this crack?
Just about center, a little north of center, the Geiger counter rose very, very dramatically. At that point, they scooped out almost half a jar full of what appeared to be molten rock or molten metal of some sort, quite radioactive.
According to Ed Barker, the material was an extremely rare grade of silver. It was coated with pitchblende ore, which contained both radioactive uranium and radium.
Why would particles and metal fragments of this size and radioactivity have been missed by all previous investigators? And this is one mystery that we don't have definite answers to this day.
I'd like to think that one day we'll get a letter from the U.S. government and it'll say, we have the two craft in our hangar over here and we were experimenting with them at the time, sorry. And I'd want to go and see them. And I'm sure Dad would too. And that would be great. What would be worse is to have this thing dragged to a point and drag on where it's never explained.
Steven Michalak and his wife remained in Manitoba until his death over 30 years after his encounter. The unexplained burn marks on his chest never went away. No matter what others said, Steven died believing he had seen something not of this earth. Next, a highway stalker may be connected to the cold-blooded murder of a long-haul trucker. Chandler, Oklahoma. An anonymous caller reports a body lying beside a phone booth at a highway rest stop. Authorities arrive to find the man has been murdered. Coins are scattered all around his body. The dead man is Dwayne McCorkindale, a 27-year-old truck driver and father of twin girls. He has been killed by a single shotgun blast fired at close range. The apparent motive, robbery.
If Dwayne had been killed in an accident, I could have stood it a lot better. It seemed so ironic that he was killed for money, when the last thing a trucker will do is carry very much for that very reason.
Every day, thousands of big rigs roll across the highways of America. CB radios are their lifeline to the rest of the world. But for Dwayne McCorkindale, a casual conversation over the airwaves may have signed his death warrant.
Yeah, it's double whammy. Headed back to Kansas City. Come on back.
Dwayne's final run began like any other. He left Detroit, Michigan, headed for Oklahoma City.
Wife and the 2 baby girls waiting for me back there.
McCorkindale made a regular run bringing parts to an Oklahoma City automobile plant. We have no reason to believe anything was different that night. He enters the turnpike, he's given a ticket with the time on it, and through that ticket, we're able to determine that he made no other stops. He drove directly from the turnpike gate to the rest area.
Other truckers reported that late in the afternoon, Dwayne told them he was pulling over at the Chandler rest stop to call his wife.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull over here at this rest area, call the wife, see how things back at home. We'll catch you on the other side. We'll see you later. It's double whammy. We gone. Bye-bye.
We theorized that someone had been listening to him on the CB and actually followed him into that rest area, or perhaps was already there waiting for him. It looked like he was walking up to the telephone, perhaps counting change out in his hand, since there was change there at the base of the phone booth, and was killed as he stepped up to make the call. Whoever was involved in this killed McCorkindale, just shot him in the back. He was dead before he hit the ground. Then checked him to see if he had any money on him, any valuables at all. People like that are, to us, scary, because those type of people, in our minds, are very likely to do it again.
What we got, Tom?
The only items missing were Dwayne's keys and his wallet. Investigators estimate the killer's total take was no more than $25.
Early on in the investigation, our leads were thin. One of the things that the agent started doing is he started putting notices in the trucker magazines across the United States, and the calls started coming in.
Within days, several truckers called investigators about a brown Ford Pinto equipped with a CB radio.
At the time of the McCorkindale death, we have reports that the Pinto was driving very erratically on the highway, trying to cut 18-wheelers off.
Hey, man, what do you think you're doing? Trying to get somebody hurt out there?
Well, you don't know who you're messing with, good buddy. We'll drive anywhere we want.
Hey, man, ain't no way to do it. Come on now, behave out here. You're gonna get somebody hurt.
So, we've already killed one trucker, and we'll kill another if you stay in our way.
And when the truck driver would call them on the CB, they were abusive. They said that, leave us alone or we'll do to you what we did to this other trucker.
3 weeks later, authorities received a call from another trucker who reported a strange encounter he had the day before the murder. While he was having lunch at a rest stop, he was approached by a young woman.
So you got any dope you can let us have? We really need something.
She looked kind of trashy. I mean, it looked like she had been on something, and she was just awful shaky.
Me and my crew, we've been down in Texas visiting some friends. We're trying to get back to Alabama. Can you help us find the road to get there?
I kind of turned to reach to get a map, and next thing, she's got her whole front half inside the truck.
We just need a few bucks. I really need something.
About that time, this brown Pinto pulled up, and then she jumped down off the truck, and they took off.
The next day, just 13 miles south on the same highway, Dwayne McCorkindale was gunned down.
After I read that article, I thought maybe I'm lucky that I didn't get out of the truck. Otherwise, I might have been the one that would have got shot.
While we have no way of knowing if the Pinto was actually involved in this or not, it is without a doubt our strongest lead, and we have got to locate the Pinto and ultimately the people to talk to them to see if nothing else, we can eliminate them from this situation.
Today, authorities are no closer to finding the Pinto and Dwayne McCorkindale's killer than the day he died. The occupants of the Pinto are described as a white male and a black male, sometimes accompanied by a white woman. If you have a tip that could help solve this case, please visit our website at unsolved.com. Next, the legend of the Lost Dutchman's mine. It's worth millions of dollars in gold, and it's just waiting to be found. Arizona's Superstition Mountains, a desolate wasteland. But legend has it that these mountains contain the richest deposits of gold in America. The Lost Dutchman's mine. The exact location of the Lost Dutchman's mine remains a mystery. It was supposedly discovered by a German prospector more than 100 years ago. Today, all that lost gold would be worth over $200 million.
Jacob Waltz was a student of mining, and he knew what he was doing. The old-timers were very, very astute to the fact of geology. They knew what they were looking for. If you're going to go out in these mountains anywhere and look for gold, you really want to go to places where gold has been found. Superstitions would be an exception. You wouldn't go in there.
But Jacob Waltz did prospect in those rugged mountains and apparently struck a rich vein of gold. When Waltz was 80 years old, he decided to hide his mine to protect it. He dug a hole 6 feet deep at its entrance. He then laid in 2 rows of logs and topped them with the dirt and stones. Waltz, who was nicknamed the Dutchman, bragged that you can drive a pack train over the entrance to the mine and never know that it was there. Several months after Waltz closed up the mine, he got pneumonia and was taken to the home of his friend, Julia Thomas. On his deathbed, he told her there was gold from the mine stashed under his bed.
He said, "That's what I've been living on all these years." He took out the box, they opened it, and their comment was, "My God, that's rich." He said, "It's a vein." He said, "There's enough in sight to make millionaires out of 20 men."
The Dutchman gave Julia and a local miner, Reinhard Petrasch, only clues to the mine's location.
The old northwest corner of the Superstition Mountains. Take the trail in.
He died before he could give them a map that showed the exact location of the mine. Soon after Waltz's death, Julia, Reinhard Petrasch, and his brother Herman searched for the mine using the vague clues Waltz had given them.
He said, "The setting sun shines into the entrance to my mine and glitters on the gold, so it must have faced to the west." He said, "You take the first gorge on the south side from the west end of the range." He said that you can see Weaver's Needle to the south from above my mine.
They went in there for almost 5 weeks. They came out without any gold. And this was noted in the Arizona Republican in 1892. In fact, they called it the Queer Quest in search of gold.
Julia invested everything she owned into the expedition, but she returned broke. She never again set foot in the Superstition Mountains. Herman Petrasch accused his brother Reinhard of getting Jacob's directions wrong. They never spoke again. Reinhard continued to search for the mine, but when he realized he would never find it, he took his own life. Almost 100 years later, a modern-day treasure hunter claimed he found the mine. His name was Walt Gassler, head chef at the Biltmore Hotel in Phoenix. Walt used clues handed down from Jacob's deathbed and spent years looking for the legendary mine.
Nice to meet you. Have a seat.
Thank you.
When his health began to fail, Walt contacted two prospectors, Bob Corbin, who was then the Attorney General of Arizona, and Tom Collenborn, a local historian.
He wanted to get together with me so that we could perhaps go with him and continue looking for the mine and with his directions after he had died. And he gave me his notes as well as a map as to where his camp was and where he believed the mine to be.
2 months later, Walt called Tom. He was very excited and claimed that he had finally located the Dutchman's mine.
How are you doing? Walt Gassler called me on Sunday evening. He said, I'm going to the mine. I know exactly where it is.
I just can't possibly break away in the morning.
You and Corbin have to go. Walt Gassler was convinced that the mine existed from the clues that he had. Some of those clues he would not reveal. And the next morning, his wife took him out to the trailhead and dropped him off.
See you in 3 days.
Walt hiked alone into the superstitions, never to be seen alive again. His body was found 3 days later. An autopsy proved he had died of a heart attack.
I'm Collenborn?
Yes.
I'm Roland Gassler.
How are you doing, Roland?
1 month after Walt's death, historian Tom Collenborn had a surprise visitor.
And he said he was Roland Gassler, Walt Gassler's son. So he said, well, you know, my dad found the Lost Dutchman in the superstitions. And he got out a piece of gold, showed it to me.
Boy, that stuff really looks good.
It looked very similar to the gold that allegedly came out of the Lost Dutchman mine.
Where'd this come from?
Came right straight out of my dad's backpack. Bob Corbin.
Roland insisted his dad had found the lost mine. He wanted to retrace his father's steps, and he took back Walt's old maps and notes.
Yes, that is my dad's.
You're his son. You're the one it should go to.
2 months passed. Tom never heard whether Roland's search was successful. One night, after giving a lecture, Tom was approached by another stranger.
Collenborn?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Roland Gassler. I've been wanting
This
to meet you for a
man
long time
claimed
now.
that he was Roland Gassler.
Walt Gassler.
And I think my jaw dropped 10 foot to the ground. It wasn't the same guy. I said, I ought to ask you for a driver's license or something. I said, you're the second Roland Gassler I've run into in the last couple of months.
Sure looks like you're Roland Gassler.
Yes, sir.
After meeting 2 Roland Gasslers, I wondered who was really Roland Gassler.
I'm Collenborn?
Yes.
It appeared the first Roland Gassler was an imposter. He apparently wanted Walt's maps so that he could find the mine himself. But where did he get the gold ore sample?
Came right straight out of my dad's backpack.
When Walt died, the sheriff's report listed a backpack among his belongings. But the real Roland Gassler never received it. Don Shade, the man who found Walt's body, also remembered seeing the backpack. And he noticed a stranger in the area that day.
There was another man in the area at the time. When Tom Collenborn later gave us a description of the man that came to him and showed him some gold, it jibed up with the man that we saw in here.
Some believe that the fake Roland Gassler was in the mountains when Walt died and stole the backpack with its precious ore.
I like to believe Walt found it. He spent so many years looking for it. And the last thing he would have done in his life before he died would have found the mine. I'd like to believe that.
When Jacob Waltz died, he left a trunk of gold and a list of clues. He also started the legend, which has captured the dreams of 3 generations of treasure hunters.
I have good reason to believe that the Dutchman's legend could be true. I've seen the ore that was under his bed when he died. I've seen the assay report on it. And at today's gold prices, that ore would be worth over $2.2 million a ton. It's the richest gold ore I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen a lot of gold ore.
This could have been Gassler's trick in the trail.
The Superstition Mountains have been reclassified as a federally owned wilderness area. If the mine were found today by the fake Roman Gassler or anyone else, all the gold would belong to the government. But this does not prevent modern prospectors from still searching for the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. Next, a pretty co-ed goes for a morning bike ride and never returns. Bloomington, Indiana. 19-year-old Jill Behrman leaves her home after breakfast. She doesn't have to be in class until noon, so she heads off for her morning ride.
Jill treated a bike ride like a workout. She took it pretty seriously, and she wanted to ride hard. And her friends have told me that going for a bike ride with Jill was not very much fun because they couldn't keep up.
Jill is a business major at Indiana University. Everyone describes her as a fun-loving, all-American girl.
I filed a curse.
Later that day, Jill's parents become alarmed when she doesn't return home.
It's way after dark, it's very late, it's cold outside, and I was alternating between being sad or worried or maybe even angry, thinking, why would she do this? Why would she go off and not tell us what she's up to?
It was then that we both were really, I think, terrified as to just what might have happened to her.
Jill Behrman had vanished. Police thought she might have been abducted or that she had been the victim of a hit-and-run accident. But there were no signs of foul play and no body. There were just no answers. News of Jill's disappearance spread quickly. Soon, hundreds from the community joined investigators in their search. Local cycling clubs traced the routes that she may have taken.
They had groups of people not only searching the roads, but about 150 feet or so off on each side of the road, in the woods and the ravines and places that we know that Jill liked to ride.
Despite their massive effort, searchers found no trace of Jill. But then a vital clue surfaced. A resident of Bloomington reported that on the same day Jill had disappeared, he had found an abandoned bicycle. The serial number identified it as Jill's bike. Investigators searched the area where the bike was discovered, but they found nothing. Authorities were puzzled. Jill was last seen headed south, but her bike was found 10 miles northwest of her home.
That's not a route that she would have been on that day. That's about 10 miles away. It's through town, it's through a great deal of traffic, and she wouldn't ride in the traffic.
We've had any number of theories in this, and certainly one of those theories is that Jill was targeted and that they placed the bicycle in an area different from where she was last seen in an effort to try and at least lead us away from the area in which she was in fact abducted.
She's not with the bike, and the bike is somewhere she would not have ridden, and this isn't making any sense. This is even more mysterious and more scary now because now I don't know what to think.
The day after the bike was found, a Walkman radio mysteriously turned up in the parking lot of a local church. It was the same model and color as the one Jill usually took with her while cycling. At the same moment the Walkman was found, an eyewitness saw a suspicious pickup truck leaving the parking lot.
There's no indication that that pickup truck was related to the Walkman. However, we've attempted to try and find the not only the pickup truck, but certainly the individual driving it. We've been unsuccessful in doing that.
A year later in Kentucky, a female cyclist was almost abducted. A driver intentionally hit her and then tried to drag her into his car, but he was chased away by a witness. A police artist made this sketch of the suspect. Authorities believe he may have been involved in Jill's disappearance. Another theory is that Jill was the victim of a hit-and-run accident.
We believe that it was certainly possible that Jill was struck by a group of people who were high on drugs, alcohol, or both, that these folks panicked.
And instead of leaving her or trying to get help for her, they put her and the bike in a vehicle and took her.
However, there was very little damage to Jill's bicycle. Perhaps Jill was not on her bike when she was hit.
That's one of the hardest things about this whole situation, is the not knowing. Without knowing whether she's alive, without knowing where she is.
I miss that smile. I miss her laugh. It's a nightmare that just keeps going on.
Every night, we light the candle on the front doorstep, and it stays lit all night until the next morning.
It's kind of a beacon of hope. And just as a reminder that Jill is still missing.
And every day we pray that that's going to be the day that we find Jill.
Update. 3 years after Jill Behrman disappeared, her remains were found in a remote area outside of Bloomington. It took another 3 years for authorities to piece together a case against John R. Myers, who lived just 3 miles from where Jill's bike was found. He apparently had become upset with his ex-girlfriend and took his anger out on Jill. A jury found Myers guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 65 years in prison.